it's good to partner with him for this presentation tonight, because he can also talk about, for some of you, that may be applicable for the SoCo adapts. So bottom line, structural hardening is very important as defensible space. Ivan's a local expert, and I'm glad everybody's here. So thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. I apologize for his garbled words at times. Again, he is traveling, but we're really grateful for him supporting this webinar today. So at this point, let me turn it over to Ivan to do his magic to provide us with great info. Let me get you spotlighted. There you go. All right, Ivan, thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla, and thank you, Chief Turbeville, for the warm introduction and for providing this opportunity to speak with you all. It's great to see everyone, many familiar faces and also plenty of new ones. I thought we could start by inviting folks in the chat to share a little bit about where they're dialing in from, and just introduce yourselves to everyone else here, so that we're going to be using the chat, and we're going to have some polls and quizzes here. So let's start exercising our mouses, and we'll move forward. So as Priscilla gave me a great intro, thank you for that. And in addition, I live here in Sonoma County in Santa Rosa. I'm also a board member of Safer West County, which is another community wildfire organization primarily focused on District 5 communities in the Russian River Basin. And we also, in addition to offering these assessments, offer our software to fire agencies and communities that are interested in doing assessments and helping their communities get hardened. So as a starting point, wanted to ask folks here. So let's do a little knowledge test. And Priscilla, if you could go ahead and launch that first question here. So how many US homes are forecasted to be involved in a wildfire over the next 30 years? And this is at a cumulative rate of 2% or more, excuse me, 6% or more chance. How many homes have a more than a 6% chance of being involved in a wildfire in the next 30 years? So everyone's weighing in. This is looking good. I'm very impressed. We're going to go ahead and end this poll here and share the results. And I'm so impressed. Everyone here is spot on. So according to the Wall Street Journal and the First Street Foundation, approximately 1 in 5 homes are at risk of being in a wildfire. And this isn't just in California, of course, although we track to that number. It's also in many other parts of the Western United States, and as we're seeing now, in parts of Canada and even on the Eastern Seaboard. So that's a big factor for all of us. I forgot to mention that we will be sharing some videos and images of homes that have burned as a way to educate ourselves and to increase our knowledge about how to see fire, but also knowing that for many of us who may have lost a home or know people who have, there could be some images that might trigger. So please, I'll try to announce that ahead of time better than I did here. So in addition, as Chief Turbeville mentioned, defensible space is so important. And I'm going to spend most of my talk here talking about structural hardening. And it's going to sound like I don't think defensible space matters, but I want to say up front that's not the case. It's just that I think most of us have, thanks to all of our public agency partners and so many others, have gotten the message out, and that most people understand they need to be limbing up their trees, they need to be thinning vegetation and moving things like wood piles away from our homes. The other thing I want to point out here is that despite the risks that we're facing in our communities, you can see here that it's not every home that burns in a wildfire. And unfortunately, with the devastation that we've seen, one of the positive things that has come out of the last 5 years of research is that we're starting to understand what causes certain homes to burn and others not to. And several of our advisors, Dr. Steve Quarles, who used to work for the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and also Dave Shue, who used to work in the CAL FIRE Office of the State Fire Marshal. They've helped us really increase our awareness and understanding of the science here. And I'm going to share a little bit of that with you all. And as we all know too, this is affecting us both in our pocketbooks. So insurance is becoming more difficult to get. Our premiums are going up in these wildfire areas, and it's really easy to feel powerless. And unfortunately, a recent study came out and showed that between 2015 and 2022, homes that were required to disclose that they were in high wildfire risk areas sold for 4.3% less on average, which was almost $23,000 less. And so this is starting to affect our real estate values. I'm hearing from realtors that homes are falling out of escrow because of insurance contingencies, and it's really starting to bite us. And I know that there's a lot of efforts happening. It's a really complex situation that we don't really have time to go into today, but there is some glimmers of hope on the horizon, and we'll be talking about that. So what is home hardening? And we're going to go into each of these in more detail, but this is a graphic that we know in the modeling that insurers use. The hardening and defensible space, each one reinforces each other and together can reduce risk up to about 75%. So this does have an impact, and we've done the defensible space. So we're modifying fuels, we're reducing exposures. The other dial or knob is the home hardening. So we want to increase the protection and the shielding on our homes so that they are more resistant to embers, to radiant heat, and to direct flame contact exposures that they could be exposed to in a wildfire. And these things do work. There are plenty of examples of this. This is one in Sonoma County, up on Sonoma Mountain during the glass fire, where this farm had begun to do defensible space and structure hardening around some of their production facilities. And they had started a couple years early before the glass fire came through. And unfortunately, it got to them before they were able to finish. But this is another great example where you can see that this fire, when it came through, was very hot. And clearly something was different about how this area was managed from the rest of it. The one challenge is that this identifying and mitigating and seeing risk is very technical. And here on the left, we're seeing a report from our National Institute for Standards and Technology that went to Paradise, California, and talked to first responders who were in front of homes and recreated the sequence of events that led to certain homes being lost. And as you can see here, they're mapping the distances between sheds, identifying fences. There are other versions of these analyses that locate our recreational vehicles. So RVs are a large fuel source in wildfires. And what they're finding is that each structure as fuel on the landscape has about a 30-foot radius. And with fences, that can act to increase the intensity of fires near our home and also carry them to our homes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and you'll see how it plays out here soon. On the right-hand side, this was another study done by Eric Knapp out of the U.S. Forest Service Research Station in Redding, Dr. Jana Valakovic from UC Cooperative Extension, and Dr. Steve Quarles. And they looked at what were the biggest predictors of a home surviving or not. And this is pretty small print, but I'll just identify the first one. So if a home was less than about 50 feet away from another home that was destroyed, only 5.8% of those homes survived. Whereas if they were larger than 50 feet away, greater than 50 feet away, over 35% of those homes survived. And then it moves down the chain of the next biggest predicting factors. So it's canopy cover, so tree cover from 90 to 300 feet away was a big predictor. Also, the year built turned out to be a major predictor. So we know as homes age, we add on to them. Sometimes maintenance becomes an issue. And so that's thought to be one of the reasons why home age is a predictor for wildfire risk. So we're going to talk more, though, about how these things can be addressed and all of that. So I'm going to show now a couple of videos, just a couple of quick segments. Each one's about 45 to 60 seconds long. And this is also your trigger warning to look away. And this was about a year ago in a suburb of Dallas. It was a hot day. It was in about 100 degrees. And as we can see here, this was a grass fire that started on the right-hand side of our screens. And turns out the winds were about 20 to 25 miles an hour. The property owner of the field had been cited twice. And so when they decided to address those citations, they were out there mowing in the late afternoon and must have struck a rock or something else that caused a spark. And this just took off. And it caused over $6 million of damage. 9 homes were destroyed and about 20 were affected. And we're going to look at this as a test case. The local news helicopter was able to show us and give us a front row seat. And I hope that this will illustrate some of the concepts that we're about to cover and why they're so important. So this first one here, we're going to zoom in. This is about 2.5 minutes after the helicopter arrived on site. We can see already that this grass fire blew right up, came right up next to these fences. And even here you have grass that is burning towards the home. So even irrigated lawns can carry flame. As you can also see here, as we saw in that earlier graphic from the report, you have fences igniting things like playgrounds and sheds. And these are then impinging flame on the corners of the houses and along the gutter lines, or shattering windows from the radiant heat and allowing embers to get inside the house. I also want to point out a couple of things because we're going to see in a couple of minutes, we're going to come back to some of these homes and you'll start to see the chain of events. So this was in the middle here, a pergola or maybe an arbor that had ignited and carried fire right up here to the roof line. And we're going to see in a moment why that mattered. So far, even you'll notice these trees here that were clearly in the grass fire, have been burned all around. They didn't ignite. And we've seen that in many circumstances where it's where the trees will be fine, but then the flame will continue, the fire will continue. So now we're about 3 minutes later, and this shed right here is now starting to be fully engulfed. And I'm just going to speed this along a little bit. We have here now, this shed is very angry. And as you can see, has, I'm sorry. That shed's very angry. It's ignited the corner of that house. Here you have what we call a double fence. So we have 2 fences back to back, and the process of both of them being ignited creates the heat that reinforces it and causes it to burn much faster, much hotter. And this fence has carried this fire all the way to the corner of the house. And you can start to see the char on the very corner of this house. And also now, remember this just in the last video was that arbor or pergola. Now we can see that the flames are inside the attic space. And this is pretty common and typical in wildfires where they burn from the inside out. It's the embers and flames getting in the house, igniting then all of the things that are inside the house and burning from the inside out. And I think we're going to see, I want to point out too, in this next view, remember this one. So we have a shed that's pretty good and far along, but the rest of this house is looking okay for the moment. So keep that one in mind. Over here, it's hard to tell what caused this home to be on fire. The tree seems fine. There's definitely a fence over here, but nothing apparent right off the bat. The other thing I want to point out was the length of those flames. So even in a 20 to 25 mile an hour breeze, flame lengths are going to be 3 times the height of anything that's on fire, and about 25 miles an hour wind, they're going to bend over about almost 45 degrees off of vertical. All right, last one, I promise. So here you can see that we even had active response. So with firefighters on the scene, they're still unable to put out all of these homes here. It's just too much to respond to. I want to point out too, they're aiming fire at this home, but you see smoke coming out of the attic here and here and here. All of these homes don't look like they're yet burning, but unfortunately they are. And if you continue to, if you look this up on YouTube and watch the whole way, you'll see how it ends up. So last one here, we talked earlier about this shed on fire. This home was fine. There's quite a bit of separation here, but as you can see, this shed got really engulfed, and now the corner of this home is on fire, and you can start to see it's charring the upstairs corner, and pretty soon it's going to break these windows, and now the fire is inside the house. All right. So I'm going to show one last thing. Oops. This is from that insurance industry's research lab. Our advisor used to be their chief scientist for wildfire and building durability there. I think it does a beautiful job of illustrating with this time lapse how embers strike structures, where they collect, and it's going to talk or show you why the guidance on the next pages are going to make so much sense. So over here on the right, you have a bunch of chimneys. They've fed wood chips into them, and that they light them on fire. They have a row of fans behind these chimneys, and so they're simulating about a 20 mile an hour wind. And this home is being bombarded with embers, and we can see that they hit the wall, they bounce back, and they accumulate right here at the base of the structure, and at about 5 feet from the base of the structure. So anything that is in that area is going to catch those embers, cause them to accumulate, and just like kindling, they can start to smolder and lead to an ignition. I want to point out one other thing here, which is that embers are believed to be responsible for about 80% of ignitions during wildfires. So that's another number to keep in mind here. All right, let's turn our focus here now to insurance, because that's why we're all here. So about a year ago, the insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, started a process to require that insurers tell you what wildfire scores they're using, provide an appeals process, and to give you access to the same data that they're seeing. He also mandated that they take into consideration mitigation work that you do to your property when considering your premiums. And as of about 3 months ago, the insurers all had to file new rate plans, and they're going through the process of reviewing and approving those rate plans. I think it will take probably another 3 to 4 months before they're through the 100 or so applications that they have to review. And then we'll start to see these programs become available, and hopefully a little bit of premium relief for many of our communities here. And this talk will help you understand what's coming and hopefully get a little ahead of the curve. There's also an effort from the insurance industry, this Wildfire Prepared Home Standard, that's IBHS, the same research center that we saw in a couple slides ago. and they've put out a similar but competing standard. And I know this is going to be confusing. I'm sometimes confused, but I think we're going to see a lot of alignment pretty over time between the California rules and the industry's rules. But there are some key differences that I'm going to call out for us. So what are they going to be looking for? First off is our roofs need to be Class A fire rated. We have some good news to share with you there. Our vents are going to need to be Ember resistant. So no mesh screenings that are no larger than 1/8 of an inch. Gutters are required for the wildfire prepared home standard. So they need to be metal or other non-combustible material. And in some cases, depending on the level of certification you want to go for, you'll need metal gutter covers. I think that they're a good investment to make regardless. Our eaves, underside of our roof lines, those have to be enclosed for the Safer from Wildfires framework. They're optional unless you want the plus version of wildfire prepared home. And on the Windows side, the Safer from Wildfires framework will give you or require discounts just for having double pane windows. And the IBHS program requires that they be tempered glass. Those are the windows that are in our doors most of the time, and our windows on either side of the doors, and they have the little etching in them that says tempered on them. So that's how you know and can tell. Tempered glass is about 5 times stronger than standard annealed glass. And that matters when we're dealing with radiant heat exposures and you have structures that could be within about 30 feet of your glass or your windows, and making sure that they don't crack and let ember and heat in. So we'll illustrate a few more of these concepts. Decks and porches are another distinction between the two programs, and in particular, the Zone 0. This is a new concept for a lot of us. It's that first 5 feet where we saw those embers were particularly hot. And in the IBHS version, they're not allowing any trees overhead, which, as we know, especially in our part of the world, that's a real challenge and would really change the look and feel of a lot of our neighborhoods. And so there's some conversations happening there, but right now the Wildfire Prepared Home program is holding firm on that. The last one here are these accessory structures. So being careful about what we put within 30 feet of our homes and hardening them or moving them outside of that area. All right. So what do these things look like? I can appreciate it's a little bit of an abstract concept, and we'll make it a little more tangible for us here. So Priscilla, would you do me the honor of, we've got our third quiz. So who knows what a Class A fire rated roof is? Your options are metal roof, asphalt shingles, clay tiles, treated wood shingles, or we don't know.
So
yeah.
I put this in as multiple choice, so people could pick more than one, right?
Yes, that's
so
exactly
just
right.
Keep that in mind in looking at the numbers.
All right, we'll give folks about 10 more seconds to make your choices. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and I'll share the results. So great job, everyone. Yes, metal roofs are Class A, asphalt shingles can be Class A, clay tile can also be Class A, but not treated wood shingles. Also, this stuff's very technical and confusing, so I don't know is also a perfect answer because we can't tell from the outside if a roof is done properly, whether or not it's Class A fire rated. The good news is that in California, we've required Class A fire rated roofs for almost all of our homes over the last 20 years. And the key thing here is that if you have a wood shingle roof, that cannot be Class A. And so you'll want to get a new roof in your budget plan going forward. But if you have anything else, as long as it's in good condition and it looks like the one on the left here and not the one on the right, then you're in good shape. You have a low fire risk. The other thing here, when we think about embers, we're concerned about having any gaps larger than 1/8 of an inch. And there's a lot of places around our homes that can be vulnerable to those holes and gaps. One is our gutters, where we want to protect against debris landing in them and embers landing in them and starting a fire in a vulnerable location right next to our roof lines, but also in our attic vents. So here on the right, we're showing 1/8 inch bird hole vents, they're called. And this is just metal mesh screening that's been installed, and that is just fine. Other places we can see these vulnerabilities here on the left. This is a fairly typical crawl space vent that we see where the mesh is more than 1/8 of an inch. This is 1/4 inch mesh. My suggestion, if you want to go around your home and kind of look at this, you don't have to take a tape measure along with you all the time, but if you hold your thumb up and you see what an inch is and measure that, and then you go and place it next to your vent, count the number of holes, squares in that mesh, and that is your number. If it's 4, it's about 1/4 of an inch. If it's 6 or higher, we call that 6 by 6, 8 by 8, 12 by 12. So those are common mesh sizes. Anything that's 8 by 8 or better is in good shape. Here on the right, we're showing a deck that has been mitigated recently. This is a customer of ours. So they had this deck that had less than, well, about 1 foot of clearance between the lowest part of the deck and the ground. And so what they did is we installed metal mesh on the outside, we dug a trench, and then we brought in rock and backfilled that. So it's really held in place tight. And then you can see there was a trim piece installed here to make it look really nice. So that's a great option to mitigate a deck. I'm still working on them about this beautiful lavender plant that's right next to it. But at least the pots here, you can see are ceramic and not plastic. So those are some of the things you need to look for. Other examples of vents. So over here on the left, we have what we call like a off ridge or an eyebrow vent. In this case, the property owner hired a contractor and they installed 1/8 inch or 16th inch mesh right up over the top of the existing 1/4 inch. And they just used a couple of screws and a little strip, and that's great. Here on the right, this same contractor, who I won't mention, sold the customer on a really high-end vent. So these vents are what are known as flame and ember resistant vent. They're sold by companies like Vulcan Vent, Brand Guard, Embers Out, O'Hagan Fire and Ice are all makers of these types of vents. And they're a great option. They really provide that extra level of protection. They have both fine mesh, but also a material in them that when the temperature of the air that's passing through them reaches about 400 degrees, they have a material that will swell shut and keep those flames from passing through them. So it provides that extra level of protection from flame. But what they did not recognize was that the bottom of this door had a gap about 3/4 of an inch. And so even though the embers couldn't get through the vent, this home would be vulnerable to the embers getting underneath the door and around the door. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about the whole solution here and not just trying to go for high-end solutions here. And finally, on the gaps, another common area to look for is around our garage doors. So it's very common for there to be a little bit of flex in there or some details at the lower ends of them where there's gaps more than 1/8 of an inch. And the solution for this, fortunately, is pretty straightforward. You can see it on the right where they did a very nice job installing vinyl weather stripping. And I'll show an example of that later in the presentation. So just installing weather stripping around it, it's about $25 and it's a great, easy fix. So you might have seen in that chart going back to before, there's 6 inches of non-combustible vertical clearance. And the reason this is so important is that when the embers collect at the base of walls, they also will be accompanied by debris, leaves and needles and other things that are blowing around. And we want to make sure any smoldering that occurs there doesn't have vulnerable wood siding or other fuel in that area. And so this 6 inches of non-combustible vertical clearance is anytime you have a vertical surface meeting a horizontal surface, that can be at the ground level, as we show here on the left, or where you have a roof line meeting a wall on the right. Another example is where your siding meets the walking surface of a deck. So those are all areas where embers can collect, and we want to make sure we have 6 inches of non-combustible vertical clearance. And this is going to be a little bit of a challenge for many of us, I think, if we're not building a brand new home, or if we haven't decided to replace our siding. But I'll show a couple of examples of that. So here on the right, this is a retrofit actually. And you might notice that all of a sudden there's a little bit of a change. If you have this horizontal lap siding, you can remove just the bottom couple of boards and replace this with a fiber cement product like Hardy board, for example. And this is a way to achieve the look of our existing architecture while hardening our homes. So you don't have to go and replace all of your siding with fiber cement. That can be a very expensive upgrade. And if you don't have any structures within 30 to 50 feet, it's most likely not necessary to invest in that. You can focus on just the lowest 6 to 12 inches as this homeowner did. And on the left, this is hot off the presses. This is actually a photo given to me by Dr. Steve Quarles yesterday. And there's a company called Hexion that has made a product called Armor Built. And they gave him some samples to test out. And keep in mind that this is very early days. A lot of electric utilities are using a similar product to this to wrap their power poles. And they've been doing this for 3 or 4 years and really like it. And what happens is this is a breathable, paintable, intumescent product where it has holes in it, so it's breathable, and you can paint it. And if it's exposed to heat, it will swell and block the flames from contacting the wood siding that's behind it. So it's single use. I think we'll develop some techniques for integrating it into wood siding. And of course, if you can paint it, I think with the right fasteners, we can see that this would be a very aesthetically pleasing option, and also more importantly, a lower cost option. All right, we're getting toward the end here, and I promise we'll keep going. So I'm going to invite you all to tell me why you think that this middle photo is not compliant. What about the middle photo do we see that is not compliant with the new Zone 0 non-combustible guidelines?
We'll have people put that in the chat, right?
Yes, please, in the chat. Thank you. And on the left side here, this is one of our community members here in Sonoma Valley. They've done a great job integrating some beautiful rock with their walkway. And that's a beautiful non-combustible zone. Over here on the right, this is where a lot of our fences contact our home. And this is a particularly vulnerable situation where flames that ignite the fence further out can carry it to the home, exposing the underside of the roof there to flame, as well as the siding on the home. And so I don't have any great solutions to recommend, unfortunately, because the privacy fence, all the metal options right now don't really address the privacy angle. So I'll let you know I'm on the lookout for products there, but that's something that will need to be addressed. At the very least, if you are evacuating, make sure that you leave your fences open, or excuse me, your gates open. That can help interrupt the flame moving towards your siding. So we're seeing some great suggestions in the chat here. I think everyone called this out. Several folks called this out. So we have the privacy fence or the screening fence over here, where this is wood and within 6 inches of the ground, not only is it in contact with the home, but within 6 inches of the ground, it's got that accumulation area and it's going to see embers build up against it. So that unfortunately is an area that otherwise all of this beautiful rock mulch looks good. Everything's limbed up on the tree. Some others suggested that it could be this area here. Fortunately, this is hard to tell, of course, on your end, but it's actually metal trimming. So that was a nice feature that the homeowner had done. Let's see, other suggestions. The vertical siding clearance. So fortunately on this home, this is a stucco wall that is really non-combustible, and that provides us that 6 inches. So if you have brick at the base of your wall, if you have a stucco wall, if you have hardy board, fiber cement, or concrete, you're in pretty good shape there. It's when we see wood siding that we're most concerned. All right. So here's an example of an accessory structure within 30 feet of a home. And so under the IBHS program, this shed would need to be hardened to the same level as the house in order to be okay. So you can see that we have an area here underneath where it's up on risers as it goes off the hill that would need to be screened in or enclosed. We have a door that looks like it sticks out a little bit from the frame. So there could be some gaps there that would need to be addressed. And we'd also want to be looking for any ventilation and the roofing to also be at the same level as the home. On this home side, we have some lattice work underneath, and it's really the most vulnerable right here next to the ground that we care most about. But it would be a good idea to replace this wood lattice with a metal mesh option. On the right here, we have a tool shed right next to the home. This really probably can't be mitigated, and so the best bet would be to identify another area for storing our tools. And finally, within the zone 1 and 2, so from 5 to 30 feet and from 30 to 100 feet, we want to be managing our defensible space, making sure that plants are separated. It's okay to have bark mulch in zones 1 and 2, but plants need to be spread out. And when trees can be limbed up to 6 feet, it's important to do that. If they're shorter than 18 feet tall, you can limit up 1/3 the tree height and make sure that the understory is nice and clean. I want to also call out that this property had plants over here in the zone 0 within 5 feet. And so that is something that even though out here looks pretty good, they need to spend a little time over there. All right, so we've talked about a lot of the theory, we've talked about some specific examples, and I want to arm you all with some things that might be achievable, that don't cost a lot of money and don't take a lot of time. So here are some weekend project ideas. So we mentioned the vinyl garage door weather stripping. This is a pretty affordable product at any of your big box stores. I'm not endorsing this particular one. I believe there are some that have better fasteners, but this is what it looks like. You unspool it, you cut it, and tap it into the frame of your garage around it. If you have a swinging door where it's the one panel, you cannot use this. You have to have a panel door that comes in segments and rolls back up into your garage in order to use this product. Another one for caulking gaps in our eaves and our siding is, this is a pretty affordable product. I want to call out a couple of things though to look for. So one is that you want it to have silicone in it. Latex is even better. The idea here is don't go for the cheap stuff. Make sure that you find a product that has some flexibility. It's designed for outdoor use, and won't crack over time like a lot of other products. So you need to look for that. This one I think is about $10, maybe 15 at the big box stores. So definitely invest in that. Yes.
Ivan, there was a question that actually I thought of too. What's with the vinyl? How can we use vinyl? Isn't that flammable? Why is that okay for the garage door?
Yes. So that's a great question. PVC polyvinyl has the chlorine in it is actually a flame retardant. The key thing here is that we're trying to keep the embers out. And for most of us, our garages have nice concrete at the base. And so any embers that accumulate are not going to reach the critical temperature threshold that would be required to ignite any vinyl or plastic there. The more important risk is keeping the embers out. And so it is a little bit of a trade-off, but it's one that is worth making. There are metal flashing options that could be tried. Those can bend and deform over time and can actually create gaps that could be also vulnerabilities there. So you could use metal if you want, just be aware there's some of the trade-offs there. Whoops, I don't know what happened there. Oh, I know what happened. All right, we'll go back to this one. Oi. Okay, I'm going to use the keys to advance. Some of us have some larger gaps around our homes, especially up in the eaves. Oftentimes, this is where birds and animals like to hang out, or insects building nests, and we want to fill those in. And so you can use wood and paint that. Another solution is mineral wool. So some of the same material that we use for insulating our homes, it's actually fire proof, and you can just buy a bag of it, take out bits and stuff it up in there, and that can deter things. Yes.
Yeah, Ivan, we're not seeing your screen if you're sharing.
I apologize. I'm not sure what
No,
happened.
that's all right. It went kaput.
Okay. How about
Perfect.
now?
Right on.
There we go. So in this example, up there in the eaves, there's kind of a gap in the construction, and we can take this mineral wool and stuff it up in there and protect embers from getting up in that vulnerable location. And lastly, vents and screens. So these are two examples of products that I was able to find on Amazon, quite a bit less than some of the flame and ember resistant products that I mentioned earlier. And the key things here to look for: you want 100% metal for both the screen and the frame. You want it to be corrosion resistant, so galvanized or stainless steel. And for the galvanized, you want 8x8 mesh. For stainless steel, it's a good idea if you can to go up to 12x12, but 8x8 also works. Stainless steel comes in two different grades for our purposes. There's actually more, but the ones that we care about are stainless steel 304, which is the standard material. And if you live in the coastal zone where you see a lot of fog and salt water in the air, then you want the 316 marine grade that will last you a nice 15, 20 to 25 years. For most others, even the 304 would be fine, but for those in the coastal zone, think about upgrading. The one thing I want to really avoid and caution you against are the diamond mesh products. They'll sometimes say they're 1/8 of an inch, and that's this distance, but the vertical distance in a diamond is longer than 1/8 of an inch, and that doesn't meet the standards that the insurance companies are looking for. One other note of caution to look out for: you're going to want to consult a licensed contractor to make sure that you have enough airflow for the vented space. And so sometimes it's a good idea to remove the existing screen before putting on the new one. In other cases, you might just be able to install the new screen. All right.
Ivan,
Yeah.
a quick question that came up in the chat is, do bathroom and kitchen ventilator vents need screening?
That's a great question. So with the kitchen vents, those are typically required to be completely non-combustibles. And so there's really very little risk of embers getting up into there. And we actually have particulates, oils, greases coming out of them that we don't want those vents to clog up. So for a kitchen vent, as long as you have about 1/4 of an inch, you can go to 1/8 of an inch, that is okay. If an ember gets in there, it's not going to land on anything combustible. In the case of a bathroom, this is a little bit different. It really depends on kind of your configuration. Is it venting through the roof? Is it venting out the side? For those, we want completely non-combustible materials, so a metal vent, and it should have a flap as well as a screen on it. And if you want to go even further, it'd be better to have a downward facing metal hood around there. And there's a couple of products out there at the big box store. Gibraltar is the brand that I noticed recently that sells what I'm describing.
Great. Ivan, I'm thinking there's one more question in the chat, and I'm thinking we should be winding up. We only have 3 minutes left here.
All right.
Were there other things that you wanted to go through quickly, or should I ask you a question from the chat? What's
I'll wrap it up here. So as Marshall mentioned, the SoCo Adapts program is going on right now. We are the contractor to provide those assessments. For many of you in the COPE areas, you could be eligible for a free assessment between now and the end of the year. It makes you eligible for up to $10,700 in grants. It's not code enforcement. There's no obligation to do anything. And the process is really simple. You can schedule a 15-minute phone call and check your eligibility. And I think we have a link for checking eligibility there. We'll come out and look at your property and give you a beautiful report that helps you decide how to build your plan. And it goes beyond the code compliance. It touches on all the things the insurers are looking for and provides you options for every budget. And the last thing I want to mention is for those who might not be eligible for the SoCo Adapts program, we have a great resource and asset in our community, Evan Bradish in the Northern Sonoma County Fire District, serving under Chief Turbeville. He is outstanding, and you can contact him, and he's available to come out and do an assessment. And for those who might want a private option, you can also give us a call. Our typical assessments cost $249, but phone consultations are free. So with that, I would love to thank Priscilla and Chief Turbeville and the COPE North Sonoma County group for having me here, and for you all for spending an hour of your time with us, learning about wildfire and how we can all do our part to reduce wildfire risk in our communities. And I would hope that we've given you some thoughts and ideas for projects you could do over the weekend. And if you feel inspired, maybe share with us which project you're feeling ambitious about, and we'll tackle this weekend.
Hey, Ivan. One quick question that is in the chat that you may want to close with, and that is whether reports done by Madronus are confidential reinsurance companies.
100%. So you are always the customer. The insurance company doesn't get access to anything without your permission, if you would choose to do that.
great. Thank you, Ivan. I appreciate it. Are you able to stay a couple more minutes to answer some questions going a little bit past 6, or do you need to run?
I can stay on for about 5 more minutes.
Okay. I'm going to launch the evaluation. I would love it if people would give us some feedback on our webinars. We really take it and you know, we take it to heart and try to make improvements every time we give a webinar. So we'll be giving another webinar this fall and let you know about it on Facebook and through our newsletter and whatever other way we can get it out there. So just quickly looking in the chat. How about dryer vents?
Dryer vents are another great question. So there's a couple vulnerabilities there. One is lint is exceptionally combustible. So you want to make sure in June, July, as part of your routine maintenance, you go around and you clear out that dryer vent lint. The other thing is you don't actually want an 1/8 inch or 16th inch mesh on your dryer vent. That's only going to lead to more accumulation of lint and make your home more vulnerable. So 1/4 inch on a dryer vent is okay. The good recommendation here is that just like the bathroom vent, we want a metal, all metal, with a downward facing hood and a flap to make sure that that stays closed when it's not in use. And especially if it's within 6 inches of the ground outside, we're worried about it melting and being exposed to embers. And so that's why the metal is so important.
Can you address skylights just real quickly?
Yeah. So skylights, like windows, it comes down mostly to what they see, how much vegetation is within 50 feet of them. If they're on a steep angle, like an A-frame cabin, where the skylight is on what is essentially the siding of the home, even though it's a roof. What do they see? How far out? So the important thing with skylights is what material is the skylight made out of. We want to make sure that there's no debris accumulation around the top and the sides of it. And the easy way to tell is if it's a dome, it's going to be plastic, acrylic. That is not okay from a wildfire risk standpoint, especially if there's another structure or maybe some tall trees nearby. But the good news is, in most cases, going back to the 70s, if it's glass, it's been in the code that they have to be tempered glass. So they're made out of that stronger glass and are fairly resistant to heat exposure. So that's what we want to look for there. The other thing to consider, and it's in the building code now, but if your skylight is able to be opened or operable, we want to make sure that there's a 16th inch metal mesh screen in there. It helps keep the bugs out. And if we happen to evacuate or forget to close the skylight when we evacuate, it'll provide a little extra protection from embers that might be exposing our home.
Great, thank you for that. I really appreciate all of your expertise and this wonderful presentation that you gave to us with really actionable things that we can do and really practical science-based information. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you, Ivan, for being in our community and offering your knowledge to us and your expertise, because it's really a treasure to have you. And thank you, Chief Turbeville, for sponsoring this webinar. We're grateful for you as well in our community. Amazing human being, as we all know. So thank you all for being here. We look forward to engaging in work with COPE and hope that we can support you and your community in being better prepared to prepare, for these disasters that are upon us, fire being only one of them. So again, thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing you at our next one. And with that, I will close. Take care, everyone. Stay cool.